You might have gathered that I love spirals. So this is one of my favorite pendants to make in the shape of a spiral, and it's a beaded one. So it's a little bit more decorative and colorful, and you can do it with bugle beads, seed beads, any type of beads you have to hand, any type of wire you have to hand. So I'll just try and give you a bit of inspiration. So I'm using 1.6mm soft aluminium wire for the framework, and I'm going to start off with my round nose pliers. Of course you can use other wires. I'm just using this one because it's so soft and easy to manipulate, but you can use a silver plated copper or a copper wire or a gilt wire or a sterling silver. Just go with it, and the size of it will depend on the gauge you're using as well. So I'm making quite a big piece. So you start off by making a little spiral, which will be the inside of the whole piece. Now I've kept that quite tight in the middle, as you can see, and then I'm opening it up to create a space, sort of like a snail shell. The reason I kept it tight in the beginning is because I want to glue a central stone, sort of cabochon, or a flat back crystal or anything to the center. So I want that bit to have something to have somewhere to glue onto. And then it's up to you how big you make this or the space you want to give to this. I suppose that will depend. If you're using bugle beads like I am, that will depend on the length of your bugle beads. But I tend to be just to go with the flow and create the spiral, and then I decide on the beads later usually. So create the spiral as best you can, and if there are any sort of kinks and lumps and bumps in it, try and work them out. This is what's so good about aluminium, is it's very easy to work them out. And then at the opposite end, the cut end, you want to make the link. That will be the suspension link, and that link will eventually be turned at a right angle to the piece, because that's where your cord or your chain or whatever you're going to hang it from is going to sit. So I tend to turn that to a right angle. And once you've got it exactly as you want it, I mean, as you can see, it's never perfect, but I quite like that about handmade pieces. I like the fact that they're never perfect. They don't look like they're mass produced. They've got that lovely wonkiness. And anyway, get it as you want it, and then you're going to work hard on it by hammering on a steel block with your steel head of your Whammer hammer. So I usually you can either start in the middle or just gently keeping the hammer really low down to the piece, so that you're not distorting the spiral that you've made. Just very gently stroke hammer outwards, away from your fingers. So outwardly that spreads and flattens, and you just do this very gently, because it's really just to give the structure a little bit of, I don't know, work hardening, so that it's tempered and it doesn't, when you start beading it, it doesn't distort and change its shape. So as you do it, it will sort of lift up. So I've turned it over because you'll find, because it's such an open frame, that as you hammer, it sort of lifts in different places. So you just need to go around, and then you might have to turn it over and just do it gently. And if it distorts, just keep working on it with your fingers. And see, I'm just wanting it a little bit flatter, but if you find that it has distorted and lifted up in certain areas, especially at the top because it's so open there, you might have to use your nylon head of your hammer just to stroke that down again and flatten it out without doing any more, a sort of hard hammering on it. So spend a bit of time, as I am, on the frame, because once you've got the frame, it's there, and then you can start your beading. So with the beading, you're going to use 0.4 of a millimeter. That's the gauge. And because I'm using silver, it's silver plated copper. You can't get this in aluminium. It would be so flimsy if you did. So use silver plated copper. And first of all, I'm going to connect it right under that first suspension link. So right at the top, bind it round a few times, cut off the excess, and just neaten that end with your chain nose pliers to make sure that it's not going anywhere and there's no spiky protruding piece. And I want to fill that gap. So this is why these bugle beads are fantastic for that, because they're solid. I'm not using a whole row of little seed beads that could bend. Otherwise, if you don't have bugle beads, you can use a bigger bead. So, you know, just decide on your color range at this time. So I'm going for purples and pinks. So I'm going to put out all my beads, sort of my colorways, on my mat, ready for picking up when I want to start beading. You don't have to go with such small beads. You could go with much bigger beads or use a whole variety of different types. So this is where your chosen color palette is completely up to you. So I'm starting with a bugle bead, and because I can't fit two bugle beads together because the gap isn't there, I'm using little seed beads to fill in the space until I reach the next point of my frame. So I've just got a bugle bead and two seed beads, and that will get me to the next point of the spiral framework. And then I wrap completely once around to secure it, and then I'm going to bring the wire back and move it along so it'll become like a V. This is a really quick way. I mean, if I wanted to sort of bead the whole thing, obviously I go backwards and forwards, but I'm quite impatient sometimes. I just want things done. And I love the way that you get these sort of V rays. And when you're wearing it anyway, it's usually against a background of clothing. So, you know, you've got a background color that these beads are going to sit against. So you keep making these little sort of V zigzags. And again, it's another bugle. I'm just going to go alternate bugle beads. I've got pinks and purples. And then the filler beads are the seed beads. So always wrap completely once around to secure it so it doesn't slip down the frame. And now I'll go for the pink, so alternate purple and pink. And then sometimes you'll find, because you haven't, you know, you're not a machine and you can't make the frame completely perfectly, as you can see in mine, you might need one tiny seed bead to fill the gap. In fact, here, I don't need a seed bead at all because I've made the frame, the inner part of the frame, be much narrower. So it's just the width of a bugle bead. And if it didn't fit a bugle bead, you could put 3 seed beads in a row, you know. So this is where seed beads come into their own, because they're just like little filler beads and just add that color. And when you look at it as a whole, you won't actually be counting, oh, look, there's 1 or 2 beads there. It just has an overall look of the color and the design. So every time you go around, attach it to the top and the bottom of the framework, and that way it's really secure. So you can see I'm creating these little zigzag patterns as I go around. So it's quite therapeutic doing this, and you'll just continue doing that as far as you can, or with however many beads, or you can fill it in with bigger beads. And you probably don't want to watch me doing it solidly, so I'll go on. So now I've finished that particular length of wire. So if you want to add more wire, you just go into the last bit that you've just finished, wrap it around there to secure it, to anchor it in place, and then you can continue beading exactly where you left off. So never worry about running out of wire. You can always add another extra length in and continue from that last point. So I'm just now continuing with this zigzag from where I was and going as far as I can. I mean, you don't have to do the zigzag. You could change it into something else, which I'll show you in a minute, I think, because it's fun to do different things. Now, when you come to wanting to sort of finish off that projecting end, I go back, lift it out, and then bring it back around and then cut off the excess. And that means you don't see the wire sort of coming from you know, the back of the last piece. And then just make sure you completely flatten it down. And now it's nice and secure. So I only do that afterwards, because if I did it straight away, it would be loose. So just continue backwards and forwards. As I say, you get into sort of rhythm with this, and there's something really nice about doing a repetitive thing, because you don't have to think too much. You can literally just concentrate on, you know, the alternate colorways and the repeat of the pattern, and get lost in that sort of, you know, I don't know, the creativity and the it's just so therapeutic. Your mind just goes in a nice calming motion. So now I want to show you something a little bit different. This is a sort of scalloped thing that you can do, because when you get to the center, you'll find it quite hard to keep doing these zigzags. So it's another way of decorating the whole piece. I'm just going to pick up seed beads at this point. So I'm picking up about, let's see, about 7, or maybe, no, I'll go for about 9. It depends where you want them to land. You just want it to be a curve. So you want that nice sort of curve shape. There we go. That will land quite nicely in between one of those V shapes. So a couple more beads and that should do it. So you just got to eyeball it. Let it see where it's going to sit. And it can, this is also a nice shape to put within a spiral. These curves, because the spiral is rounded and curved, and there's another curved shape to put within it. So I'm going to go alternate now, purples and pink seed beads for this, and not using the bugle beads anymore for the inner part of this spiral. So you'll see this gives you another sort of look from the rays, because the rays on the outside look good, like sort of sun rays, and then the inner part can be these sort of curved, scalloped sort of areas of beads to fill that centerpiece. So you just carry on with however you want to do it, and there you go. I've filled in as much as I can, and then just take your tips of your chain nose pliers and go around the piece, just making sure the little binding wire is nice and neat and flattened, and you know, you're happy with the overall look of the piece. And you can then glue a cabochon. I've got a nice little amethyst flat back cabochon that I can glue in there. And what I would do is create, it's like a jump ring basically, it's a jump ring setting, and I'll glue that around the piece, which looks like a sort of little, because I can't solder anything onto the wire. So, and the other thing you can do is add a chain tassel. So you just use the chain, cut it into little lengths and hang that off. But I think for mine, I'm going to put this bead on the end. So I've done that for mine. This is the beaded tassel one, and here's a completely different version. So there's so many variations you can do. So just have fun making your own. Thank you for watching.